Welcome to Con las Manos en la Masa on Fresh Tortilla Thursday, Episode 2, The Father My Children Never Had. I became a single mother young. By the time I had two children under the age of 7, I already felt like I was raising them alone. Their father was physically present at times, but emotionally absent most of the time. You could usually find him at local billiard halls or spending time with friends. The only consistent role he seemed interested in was discipline. Whether he decided to step in as a parent, it was often to punish rather than nurture. And those disagreements about parenting frequently turned into heated arguments. Some of those arguments escalated into physical altercations. For years, I focused solely on my children. Dating wasn't even a consideration, survival was. It wasn't until my oldest daughter was about 11 years old that I finally allowed myself to meet someone. I wasn't worried about how my youngest would react. My concern was my daughter. She was old enough to understand what it meant when a new man entered her mother's life. The first time she met him was at the airport. We were picking her up after she had spent the summer with relatives out of town. As we waited for her to come through the terminal, my boyfriend stood beside me holding a bouquet of flowers. When she finally appeared, he handed them to her and welcomed her home. I remember thinking it was the sweetest gesture. He introduced himself as my friend, but it didn't take long for my daughter to realize he was more than that. At the time, I didn't think much about our relationship or where it would lead. I simply took things one day at a time. After years of being single, I was trying to navigate dating again. There was only one problem. He was married. Not only was he married, but he also had children of his own. I knew that what we were doing was wrong. I knew there were moral consequences attached to every choice we made. Yet every time I considered ending things, I would look at how he treated my children. He listened to them. He encouraged them. He showed up for them. He gave them the attention they never received from their own father. And as a mother, watching that filled my heart. During that first year, I constantly battled with myself. I worried about his wife discovering the affair. I worried about the example I was setting. I worried about the future. Several times I tried to end the relationship. I ignored the phone calls. I ignored the voicemails. I ignored knocks at the door. I ignored flowers and food deliveries. But he was persistent, unlike anyone I had ever met. The truth is, our story began long before the affair. We had grown up in the same neighborhood. We attended school together and shared mutual friends. As teenagers, we knew of each other, but life eventually took us in different directions. More than 20 years later, we reconnected. But by then, I had children and was separated from my partner, and he was married with children. That's when he confessed something I never knew. He had a crush on me when we were teenagers. According to him, he had never approached me because he was afraid I would reject him. And now that fate had given him a second chance after more than 2 decades, he wasn't willing to let it slip away. He repeatedly promised he would divorce his wife and marry me. I always refused. What I considered dating eventually became a 15-year situationship. His commute between home and work gave him the opportunities to spend time with us. Most evenings, he would join us for dinner. Our daily phone calls began when he left for work in the mornings and often ended until he pulled into his driveway at night. Once he got home, I respected the boundaries of his household. I didn't call, I didn't text. If communication happened, it was because he initiated it. Occasionally, he was available on weekends, and when he was, we spent time together as a family. For several years, everything followed that routine. Then the phone calls started, blocked numbers, unknown callers, silent calls, text messages. Sometimes women would call simply to insult me for being involved with a married man. Yet his wife showed no indication that she knew about us, at least not until the day she showed up at my front door. I opened the door and there she was, his wife. She asked me what kind of woman gets involved with a married man. I could have denied everything. I could have lied. Instead, I told her the truth. I admitted I had tried to leave multiple times. I admitted that every time I walked away, he came back. Afterward, I informed him about the encounter. A few days later, he confronted his wife. According to him, he gave her an ultimatum: file for divorce or accept the situation. She stayed, and so did he, and life continued. Although that conversation at the front door was calm, it was not at the end to everything that surrounded our relationship. The block calls continue, the unknown numbers continue, the insults continue. And in the beginning, I ignored them. Eventually, I stopped staying silent. There were times when I engaged. If she already knew where I lived and had already come to my door, I saw no reason to hide. I would tell whoever was calling to stop hiding behind blocked numbers and unknown phone calls and to come speak to me directly. Looking back, I can admit that my attitude changed over the years. The guilt I felt in the beginning slowly gave away frustration and at times defiance. There were moments when I intentionally did things I knew would upset her. When he and I went out together, I would sometimes make sure we stayed out late. There were occasions when he spent the night at home, and part of me knew that if she found out, it would hurt her. And so it did. I'm not proud of those moments. At the time, I justified them by telling myself that she already knew about us, that she had chosen to remain in the marriage, and that he continued to come back to me despite everything. But with the benefit of hindsight, I can acknowledge that some of my actions were driven by anger, stubbornness, and the belief that I no longer owed any explanations. It wasn't my finest chapter, but it was part of the reality of our story. Shortly after our encounter, his family knew about me. To my surprise, not only did his relatives accept our relationship for what it was, but from time to time we would spend time together. Around the time he became more serious about leaving his marriage and moving with me, years earlier, I might have wanted that. Now I didn't. I had become comfortable with separate households, comfortable with our routine, comfortable with the life he had created, that I had created, that we had created. The desire to merge our lives simply wasn't there anymore. People may judge me for my choices, and perhaps they should. I know I played a role in a situation that hurt another family. I know there were children involved. I know our relationship was not ideal, but I also know what my children gained. They gained a father figure. a mentor, a guide, someone who attended birthdays, someone who celebrated graduations, someone who taught driving lessons, someone who helped move them into college dorms, someone who showed up while their biological father remained absent. This man was present for nearly every milestone that mattered. He helped guide my son through adolescence. He supported my daughter as she grew into adulthood. And he gave me something I desperately needed during those years: support. As my children became adults and his children grew older as well, something changed. We began drifting apart. There was no dramatic ending, no betrayal, no explosive argument. I simply realized I had fallen out of love. After 15 years, I was tired of living in a situation that would never fully become something else. Slowly, we transitioned back into what we had originally been before the affair: friends. Today, we still occasionally keep in touch. He remains married, I remain single, and I have no interest in dating. When I look back now, I see the contradictions clearly. I know what we did was wrong. I know there was pain attached to our choices. I know some people will never understand, but I also know what my children received from that relationship. For the first time in their lives, they experienced the presence of a father. And whether that makes me wrong or right is for others to decide. I can only tell my story honestly. And the truth is that despite everything, I would do it all over again. And if you ask me whether my children benefited from having him in their lives, the answer will always be yes.